So part of the journey from a student identity to a professional identity is beginning to know how we will talk about what that means, how we say who we are to other people.
All right.
Oh, wait. Now I'm warm enough. I'm taking my jacket off.
Okay. Well,
I almost wore a tan sweater today. I almost.
We're going to have a little Teams chat.
I almost wore a tan sweater with a black shirt underneath. I was this close.
That would have been.
Oh.
We would have had to cancel video recording.
No, we
know.
wouldn't. We
We
would
wouldn't
just
have
make
that.
jokes about
Look
it.
at us. I can't believe it. I'm all grown up. Will you give me a job? Gesture.
Oh my gosh.
No, we will not.
Welcome back to UNHIREABLE. This is our season 1 finale. Hard to believe. And we've covered a lot of topics about what we're up to and kind of what the mindset is of our work. And this episode will kind of talk about, what comes next. So I just wanted to share a little bit about kind of my background in advising and how students would approach career in general. And I think, we've talked about this before, but often students would come in, and in the arts, I think it's pretty abstract to think about what you're going to do in terms of careers after school. And students were always seeking out like a linear pathway. And so many of the conversations that I have with students were they would come in and say, well, I need to get an internship, and how do I do that? And or my only internship opportunity is going to be like in a gallery, right? So like what galleries can I pick from? And it just felt like very constricted. And also, I think it's just, it's overwhelming. And you think about, I need to find like the easiest, most linear thing that's in front of me. And that's a natural like human response. But often students thinking about what they could do is pretty limited and very connected to exactly what they're doing in the classroom. And they would think like, well, I like critique. Maybe I could do something where I help like hang a show and I get feedback on that. But the reality of it is most people who graduate with a degree in the arts like aren't going to be doing that for their career. So I would often, as an advisor, hit a wall with students trying to figure out really like how to help them see the breadth of the possibilities for themselves, and also my own limitations and how to help them navigate that broad spectrum of what they could do. Because beyond reviewing someone's resume or looking at internship opportunities with them, it felt like there was this massive gap to get them from thinking about what they wanted and making a decision and actually preparing for that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you make yourself, we talked about this in the last episode, like how do you make yourself stand out as a student when you haven't had a lot of experience? How do you get that first opportunity in the door? And it was just really tricky, I think, both for the student and for me to kind of figure out how to dig deep and help them close that gap and take steps towards becoming a stronger candidate for more opportunities. And it just felt like I was sort of failing them and saying, you could do so many things. There's so many possibilities for you. Like think bigger. And they're just sort of like, I can't. I don't even know what that means. So, they wanted that quick solution and I couldn't give it to them. And that kind of comes back to this school mindset. What's the problem? What's the solution? And I think what's exciting about this work is we're really kind of picking that all apart.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fascinating what you just spoke to is, and we see it all the time, students do career preparation just like they do school.
Yep.
What do I do? What boxes do I check?
How do I get there?
And I think it's hard because there's a set of things. I need to write a resume and I need to get it polished up, and then I'm going to go to career fair. And maybe for some people that works, but for so many students, and I think you probably were just mentioning this, you'll tell students to do that and it won't have the outcome that they expect.
Yeah.
Because it can't just be that. Because if you're trying to get a job in something outside of school, you actually have to start thinking like someone who is in a dynamic workplace. I mean, it makes me come back to our own work. Like, who are you guys? What do you guys do for work? It's one of the hardest questions for me to get, but I answer it, I was hired in to do 3 specific programs. By the time I was here for less than 6 months, all 3 were gone. One had declared bankruptcy because it was a partnership with an outside company. Another was a complete failure on part of the program. Good job. But we learned a ton from it. And so I think that's the sort of thing, this dynamic, evolving nature of what work looks like. I mean, it almost is like if you're going to do career prep like school, you're going to get a job that's like school. Yeah. We talk to that all the time where it's just going to be rote. And I don't know a single student who says, I'm really excited for just a boring clock in, clock out, nothing job where all I had to do was check some boxes and they gave me my job. All right, sweet. Have fun with that one. But that's not what we do here.
Yeah.
And I think this is a challenge. I mean, we're surrounded by this ecosystem of school, and I won't go through the litany of things that we do to try to take ourselves and remove our work outside of school practice. Literally, here, we've moved to a building that is as far away from classrooms for the most part as we can get in a space that we had reconfigured to not look like school. If we had a color, we choose not purple and not gold. We don't want it to be school, and we're trying to give students an opportunity. Lucky for you, it's here at UW, it's for UW students, but it's not going to replicate anything else that's at UW. And I think that's one of the hardest things for students to say, like, okay, sign me up. Oh, I'm going to go do that. I mean, we've had that challenge the whole time we've been here.
Well, and I think that the reality, we're offering that reality that there is no quick fix.
Yep.
That there are things that you have to do that are uncomfortable, that are hard work in order to actually be ready to make an exit into the professional world. And there's so many students that did internships that couldn't talk about what they got out of it after I saw them. I was like, oh, you had an internship here. Tell me what you did. And they're like, I don't know. I just hung out and made copies or, they're just, they couldn't even think about how do I maximize this opportunity and how do I talk about it with other people. So.
Well, I think that brings up a term we use a lot. And this is a Kevin term, so I'm going to let him fully dissect it. But this community of practice, gesture is a space where we're not going to do things the way that you have thought they should be done because we know that doesn't work. And I don't want to be dismissive of our colleagues because we really respect the work that they do, but there's a time and a place for it. And if you're not in a mindset to be a professional, to work for an organization and not be a student anymore, no, like you said, quick fix is going to change that. So, I mean, in terms of community of practice, we really have made a concerted, conscious effort to take ourselves out of typical UW things. Which is why it's interesting. It's hard to explain to folks, who we are and what we do. But we are a pretty different community over here.
Yeah, I think I think you hit on it, that really trying to do a different kind of work is difficult in and of itself. Even if it has a reason and a purpose and a method like we think we have, it's hard to explain. People don't understand what it is. But yeah, that's no fault of theirs. It is hard to understand. And to your point, Liz, I think the expectation is that there will be some, if you go through school to get to career, there will be something that happens in school that prepares you for a career. Like that's just part of what school is and school does. That's the assumption. But I think our realization is that there really is no school answer to that question of how I prepare for career. Like nothing. School is a distinct phase of life in a way, and the way to prepare for career is to get out of school, and not literally when you're in early career because you're still in college, but in that transition, change your identity. So that requires, and that's the connection to community practice that you're talking about, Matt. That just in a simplified version, understanding that to change your identity, you have to change your community. That we don't just go off and think about it and become a different person. Most people don't anyway. You go and you hang out with a different group of people and do whatever they do and, become integrated into that work and the norms and the values and understand what is the work and what does it mean and how do you do it and what's important and what's not. And that is how we change identity, by becoming a member of a different community. And we're all members of different communities, which is why we have different identities. But the community of practice for school is school. And all everything about school mindset that we've talked about is how a student works and does stuff in the school practice. And so understanding that basically practices are built to do a certain kind of work. They do not prepare you for other practices, sort of by definition. So what you do in school is for school, and what you do, outside of school and work, you need a new identity for that. And so college should be a time where you kind of still have the school identity because you have to get through school, but you're also developing a new identity. And then as you graduate, then you kind of leave the school one behind and take on more fully that professional identity. But ideally, you've been working on that. If you don't work on it, then you just finish school and then you start developing that identity. That's the hard way. And it'll work out eventually, but
It'll take longer.
It'll take longer. It'll be more effortful.
Yep.
You'll feel disconnected because you won't actually have a professional identity. It will be clear that you've lost the school identity when you graduate, and now what do? You have no connections. You don't know how to get. You don't know what the language is. How do I get a job? What are they doing? What does that job even mean? What work are they doing 9 to 5 or whatever? And that's what college should be the opportunity to have both of those sort of at the same time. And I think that choice, but you have to choose that. You have to choose to, I'm going to start doing the work of building a new identity, and that does take a community.
Do you think, we've mentioned this a little bit in some other episodes, but a lot of students will say, but I've been told that here in school, I'm a critical thinker and I have strong communication skills and I'm a good writer and I do research. And first of all, those are all stemming from student practice and a student identity. We've mentioned also that if everyone here has those skills, then why isn't everyone here immediately employed and snapped up because of those hyper valuable skills?
Right.
We also know that employers, when you ask them, say actually a lot of students don't have those skills. But what is it about my identity in terms of making that conscious choice to change identities? How does that integrate with those old tropes that you've been taught and you've been told to do this? How do you reconcile that with?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a whole episode on some of those tropes, but you're right that. So I used to say that too. What do you get in liberal education? You get critical thinking, communication, and collaboration, and problem solving, and that's really just not true. Now, it's not. So there's a couple things that are problematic about that. One, I think, and again, we can dig into this later, but is there really such a thing as a generic form of critical thinking and problem solving? And I think that's not clear at all. What you learn in school is the version that works for school.
Right.
You learn to solve school problems. You learn to be a critical thinker in school ways. You learn to communicate and do a PowerPoint presentation in front of the class. At the end of the quarter where you did your 5 minutes of work and everyone did their section and you never even met the other members of your work. Okay, if that's how presentations are going to be in the work world, then yes, you're really prepared. There are some like that. They suck. So you learn how to do a presentation. Good job. And it works in some ways for school, I guess. It works to make it easier to grade those people. Now, it's not that somebody couldn't learn something from that, but by and large, within a practice, you're learning how you do things within that practice. So that's one thing. Are those skills, if there are such skills, they are learned in a school way. And then secondly, I don't know if they're really learning them anyway. But to your point, empirically, and we often talk about liberal education in the general sense, like everyone who has a liberal education has those skills. But to your point, if that was true, well, then what do we even need to just hire any liberal arts major?
They're
Clearly,
ready.
they're ready.
Yeah.
They're all the same. They all have those skills. And talking to employers, that is unquestionably false.
Yep.
That people all have those skills, or that people believe they all have those skills. So that doesn't mean nothing's happening in school, but that means that it's just a trope. And that's marketing language, which is fine. Please come to UW. We teach you critical thinking. So it doesn't necessarily mean that those things don't matter and don't exist, but it does mean that they're not necessarily what we're teaching in school, and maybe to the extent that we are, they're not all getting it. So critical thinking, let's say problem solving, for example, you learn to solve particular kinds of problems in school. What an employer, if I'm an employer, I only care about the kinds of problems that I have. I don't need you to solve problems that another company has. I need you to solve my problems? And those are often very specific. So when we talk about communication and critical thinking or problem solving or collaboration, what we mean are the versions that matter to our problems in our organization or in our task or whatever it is you're trying to solve. And so that's why our emphasis on, school to mission mindset, what problem are you solving? Whose problem is it? What does success look like? That's where you start. That's the version, because sometimes you need one-to-one collaboration. Sometimes you need a big group. Sometimes you need a small group. Sometimes it's a short project, a long project. Sometimes it's written, it's verbal. There is no universal method that you're going to use for everything, except the universal method of understanding what problem you're solving. So school, not so good at that. Well, school might be good at one version.
I wanted to add, that reminded me of our, examples within my own kind of experience.
Yeah.
So doing linguistics, there'd be critical thinking or problem solving I have to do would be analyzing sounds in a language, trying to identify them. You'd be tested on that, or that's your homework assignment, or diagramming sentences. So the whole point with those, like you said, they're like puzzles. So there's a right answer. So I guess I'm developing some critical thinking and analyzing those puzzles. But then now in my current job, I think I do have to, problem solve and think critically, but not in that way at all, where it's completely different. First of all, there isn't a right answer that I'm trying to solve to, but it's not the same type of critical thinking if that is the same skill.
Well, and it even applies within academic research because, how you solve problems across different disciplines varies very much. And that is the strength as well. We don't want one method to be used for all different applications. We need different disciplines to have their own methods and epistemologies and ways of that. That's why we have disciplines. And so the notion that then there must be something that you can learn in 4 years that's going to let you solve any problem out there is it's an insult to really the complexity of the real problems that exist. Yeah. Because you're only going to get a simplistic solution that way. So I think you're right. That does us more harm than good in the long run to talk about generic things that really don't mean anything, as opposed to helping people understand that, the first step to solving a problem is to go in and understand whose problem it is and what you're trying to do. And that will guide what method you use and who's involved and how much effort. And that is precisely the thing that you don't have to do in school because the teacher defines, here's the problem. Here are the parameters. Here are the readings you were supposed to read. Here are the concepts you have to apply. Here's how many pages the thing is. Here are the criteria and the scaffolding that I'm going to give to help you get there and to evaluate you. Again, that's fine for content learning, but that is, not how real world problems.
Well, and the story is generic, right? Mm-hmm. If that is the school story is the story of your strengths, of how you solve problems, it's not unique.
I did what they asked me to do.
Yeah,
Exactly. Along with all the other people who are getting degrees in this major. And so, Miley, to your point, every linguistics major experienced those same things that you did. And if that's your problem-solving story, you share the story with everyone else. Now, we know through work that everyone's problem-solving story or communication story or whatever skill you're going to speak to, that becomes very specific. And the way that you get jobs is telling the story of yourself that an employer can envision fitting their needs, right? We've talked a lot about this. We've gone through. But I feel like that's where, if you come back and start working with Gesture, that's where we're going to start, right?
Yeah, it's a totally fair question to say, okay, I get you're talking about mindset, you're talking about change and stuff. What are we changing to? What are we doing there? Mm-hmm. And we know we're going to change identity somehow in a community, some way. But what does that community do? Because every community practice is built around some activity, something. This group of people is doing this thing, whether it's knitting or basketball or nuclear physics or whatever it is. And so school is its own community. For us, like you said, it's story, and story is the activity that we will work on with students from the beginning to the end, and that's for a couple of reasons. It's the most superficial and in some ways the least important, but it is important version of story is or element is telling other people about ourselves, right? That's important. That is probably the one part that you do some work on in school. standing in front of a group and talking, that is one thing that you actually get practice in school, in a boring, like uninformative way. But it's not all that way, but maybe I'm a crappy teacher. I've seen doing some really crappy
Kira took
presentations.
public speaking, right? No, you didn't?
No?
I didn't, but I took a teaching as a profession course, so I had
That's
to
okay.
teach one day,
Uh-huh. Just remember you standing up in front of people. Those are good. Those actually are good experiences.
There are good experiences.
Yeah.
There are. Yeah, I definitely don't want to give them. And when you take a class on a skill like a public speaking class, we have really good teaching about that. But the implication of critical thinking and communication is that you will get that in all your other classes, your content classes. You will get, and that's where I think that's not actually usually the purpose of a content class from a faculty perspective. Anyway, that's an aside. But so storytelling is part of it, but story is actually how we change identity. That's why it's important. Because the way we become a new person and the way we understand other people, which is the foundation of solving problems, is through story. It's the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and the stories we tell other people about who we are and what's important to us and how we see the world. And so to move to it's not possible to even say that you have a new identity until you can describe yourself through that identity. I am a runner, and I run every day, or I run, this is why it's important to me. This is how it changes my diet. This is how I see the world. And now I have like 25 pairs of shoes at home and all this kind of stuff. Like, we don't just do those things without making sense of them and reshaping the stories we tell about ourselves. So part of the journey from a student identity to a professional identity is beginning to know how we will talk about what that means, how we say who we are to other people. And so that, like you said, we start with the who am I story. And when we start with, freshmen let's talk about who you are, we will get, I'm a blank major. That is the story. We get a school story. Actually, no matter who we ask initially, that's the same story. People aren't even in the major.
Or I
give that
hope to
major
be
story.
a
I hope to
blank
be.
major. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that evolves into, I am a blank major now. That's great. You evolved your 8-word story into a 5-word story. Good for you. And so at the beginning, a school identity story is always that. And unpacking that, there's a lot more depth you can put even into that story, into an academic story, and then beginning to find the elements, from school or without, like we talked about, that are the foundation of the new identity. If you're going to claim an identity, the way that you claim that is through story.
And you're not going to convince others of that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. There is a bit of a fake it till you make it element, but that's true of all identity change.
I feel like very few students are conscious of, like, you come to college thinking, I'm going to meet a lot of people and hopefully make friends and find community, But I don't think, I think it's a rare thing to be conscious of, like, how am I presenting myself and the story of myself in a way that's thinking about connections to other people. I think going into meeting professionals at the University of Washington, like, I wasn't conscious when I was an undergrad of, like, oh, I should share with them about, like, these experiences that I've had because maybe that could lead to something else. I think just that idea of being able to practice presenting yourself so that other people can see the value that you bring, that's like a rare, like, that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, it is like the one time in your life when it's your job to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like all
we're
the
paying.
time.
All the
Yeah,
time, exactly. As a student, you're paying for that opportunity. And then once you get a job, a full-time job, then now you got to do it on your own time because you're being paid to do something else. And you have to continue to do that. But I think you make a key point, and this is the other element of story that's important, is understanding, like we talked about, it's about what's important to the audience. So there are two kinds of stories. There are the stories about ourselves that we tell ourselves that are not necessarily interesting to other people because other people don't always care about that. And there are stories, the versions of that story of ourselves that we tell to others and that we learn to make that relevant to other people. And so story, to me, is really as much about everyone else in the outside world as it is about ourselves. It's a tool that we use to understand ourselves, but we're really still doing that through the lens of other people. And so, again, thinking about identity is just, all identity is membership in a community. So we're never just, alone. I'm the only one who ever is like this. What actually makes us unique, well, sociology nerd moment, but there's a way of thinking about uniqueness in a very self-directed way. Like, I have things about me, there's something in me that no one else has, which may be true. A more sociological way of thinking about it, what makes me unique is the unique configuration of community relationships I have. No one else has the exact same map of relationships to other people. And that's actually, so we're unique individually because of our unique socialness. And so that, I mean, that's admittedly a very sociological way around it, but whatever. What am I going to say?
That's your uniqueness.
That is my uniqueness.
Your
Exactly.
community of practice.
That is, totally, which is not unique to me, but yeah, that's fine. So understanding ourselves that way, I think, is important to understanding how our story is going to be relevant to other people. Right now, you use it to understand what matters to other people, and that empathy is key to problem solving and key to communication. And so I can tell you a story of something that happened to me that's going to matter to you only if I make it matter to you. Otherwise, like, what do you care? Like, that's, yeah, whatever you want on some stuff. Like, I don't care. You know, people, I think we've talked about this as well. School gives the impression to students, because the students are the customers paying, that everyone gives a shit about your story. Okay, that's because you're paying me to give a shit about your story. When you get out in the world, like, nobody cares anymore.
I know.
And they don't care until you make them care, until you make it meaningful to them. And honestly, the way to make it meaningful to them is to make it about them. And that doesn't make you any less valuable. That makes you more valuable, because you know how to create value for other people, even in things that they didn't care about at the outset, and not just by paying them, which is what we're doing in school. And that shift from it's all about me in school to it's all about other people is, you know, the essence of that.
You also
mindset
touched
shift.
on this point that I think is, I'm just going to speak for all of us, but then I'll let all of us speak. The work that we do here is so far afield from sort of the known structure of career, university, college, higher ed, that we all have trouble sometimes telling people what we do.
Yes, that you should all speak about that.
So I think that we'll do a round robin
my fault.
of, well, we can end with you if you want to talk about where this sits. I mean, I mentioned that everything I was hired in for has completely changed. The structure and the meaning of my work is always changing. I have had existential crises thinking about what I do and why I do it. And then it really comes back to I'm working on problems that feel, they're not insurmountable, but they're big, and they affect a lot of people here, and they're people I care about. So there's a lot of meaning and value in that. But I'm not a pseudo career center for liberal arts majors. I'm not, you know, all these different things. And I think people try to conceive of us that way because it's a known structure, but it's not. And what I do like about this endeavor, this podcast and this space and what we're doing here, I think it's going to be easier and easier for people to come in. All right, just, you got to take a leap of faith. If you know something needs to change about how you integrate with communities and what people understand about who you are, come work with us who struggle with that all the time and yet still forge ahead. That's sort of where I feel like I'm at. But I'm in a different space. I'm middle-aged and cynical, but I work hard.
Yeah.
And I care about students. Those things are all true.
I mean, I think it's a little different for us because we've been here. This has been our whole early career experience in a lot of ways.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't even know.
No, but
you
in a
don't
good
even
way.
know.
In a good way. I feel like we've always been pushed to look at every opportunity as the next challenge rather than just the next checkbox. And something about what, Liz, you said in the very beginning of this episode, you talked about how students feel so closed in on a linear pathway and feel like they can only do so many things. I was definitely the same way when I was a student, thinking I had to do something related to history or something related to psychology. And I think going into Gesture as an intern, that's when I first started to realize, oh, I can actually do a lot of different things. I mean, when we first entered in, or at least my cohort, you guys said, okay, here's marketing, here's HR, here's maybe two other areas of Gesture. Just pick one and do whatever and find a project to do within there, which Gesture was, I mean, even extra ambiguous than it is now. And I feel like going from that role as an intern of just picking whatever area, even into managing more concrete programs like externships or boot camp, I've always kind of had this imposter syndrome of No, I mean, I've definitely gotten over it now, but in the beginning of entering into every new role, and because it's always like, well, I don't have any experience in that. Why are they just trusting me to do these things that I've never done before, like leading 100 students over Zoom on career readiness, when I'm like, I'm just a senior in college. I don't know what I'm doing either. And I think that goes into curriculum too. I mean, just every time I've entered into a new role, but I think that's what has made Gesture different, I'd imagine, is there's a lot of trust amongst you all, and having Miley and I do these roles that are so out of our experience level, yet you trust that mindset that you've worked with us on over the past few years is what's actually going to make us successful in those roles. And you're also supportive and helping us through that. And yeah, I think that's what makes it so different. And also viewing those again as challenges, and that they're ways to grow, especially.
That's great. Do either of you ever have issues sort of, because you have friends and family and colleagues who are also in early career and thinking about that. I mean, does your work sound or feel or look different when you try to explain it to them or talk to them about what they're doing in different capacities?
Yeah, I think friends, family, anybody who kind of just wants to check in about what I'm doing. It's always a very interesting discussion. I always have, all these things go through my head, like you're saying, thinking about them as an audience. What do I share with them? Trying to adapt them, my personal story, into something that's interesting to them, whether that's just like, how are you doing? Or like, I actually want to sit down and talk about like this kind of work you do. But then as well, trying to figure out what is the work that I do. Because I think, like you said, even in this first role, I think I've done maybe 5 or 6 different jobs in this one job, just because I think that's just the nature of how Gesture and the work that we do here changes a lot, which I think is something unique to our work. We're not going to be stuck in a certain way just because that's just the way we do it. We take this time to reflect, do these resets, really think deeply about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then, you change it, you'll completely stop doing a program and say, we got to do it differently. So I think that's really unique, but it does make it difficult to talk about with people. Someone asked me one time, I was like, so what do you actually do? Like, what does your day actually look like? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess it varies by day. Right now, we're doing some filming. So at least that's kind of concrete, actually, to talk about this project.
Sure.
Oh, and all these things you've had to learn to do this.
Yeah, I think I've learned that that's kind of things I can talk about a bit more, like the growth of it versus like what exactly I'm doing, because it's so different. Earlier, like when I first came into this role right out of being an intern, it was managing the internship boot camp kind of program, helping out with the externships as well. So, working closer with students and actually running a program, so more like program management in a way. But right now we have no current programs running like that. Soon to be in the future, we'll get back to that.
Bigger, better, newer. Yeah.
But we haven't actually done those programs in a long time, relatively. So now we're doing all filming. So anyways, it's interesting to kind of think about how do I summarize my experience to people. But yeah, talking about these skills, that I can do some audio engineering now, or, we can actually produce this podcast, so that's kind of what my story has been around recently. We're producing this. I can talk a little bit about the concepts. I think the concepts are interesting to people as well. Talking about, I always have to mention that, I work on early career prep for students, but we're not the career center.
I'll just tag on to that because I relate to everything that you said. At least curriculum's a little bit more concrete, except no one has any. I'm sure the viewers have no idea what curriculum is either. But what I was going to say about early career prep is the only time I feel like I really get into what we're doing is if I hear someone say, it's normally about like complaining about a coworker, or maybe a lot of my friends are starting to get to the age where they start taking on interns or people who they're mentoring or whatnot, and they'll complain about them. But what I'm really hearing when they're complaining is, oh, their mindset isn't the right way, or it's not, they're not oriented towards mission mindset. And those are the times when I start going, oh, well, let me tell you about that. That's all about our work. And I feel like those are the moments when people I know really start to understand what we do, because normally I will give them the basics, kind of the closest thing to a career center description, because for people who are just getting to know me, it's the easiest way to describe what I do.
It's funny. I feel like we meet so many people when we tell them the type of work we do, how we engage with students, why we do it, the problems we're trying to solve through this work. I hear this all the time. Oh my gosh, I wish I had that.
Mm-hmm.
Or we've done it in front of parents, and they're like, "You need to talk to these people."
Yeah.
This is because there's a, hindsight being 2020. I think a lot of people realize, especially professionals, once they get out in the workforce, that college couldn't be the only solution to career readiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that feels, reassuring for us in terms of we know we're on the right track. When we keep hearing it again and again from professionals, from recruiters, from companies, from people in the workforce saying you're on the right track, that to me is a vote of confidence. So you don't have to just take my word for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think also like we're using ourselves. Like we are in the community of practice as well. And that's the thing that I feel really excited about, because I think that, there are these traditional models where you go in, you get help on your resume, and then you're out in the world and like, you know how to do that now. And like, this is really a different way of thinking about how can you continually assess what you're doing and how you're engaging in the world and being intentional about that. And I think we can all continue to do that. And that's what's like exciting and also uncomfortable about our work. So we're in it. We're students. We're in it trying weird things, feeling uncomfortable, failing, and then learning from that, And I think that's the thing that like I feel really stoked about.
Going back to like when I was an intern going into, full-time here, Gesture and doing the programs and eventually like just getting involved here, that really made me feel like I had a sense of a different identity, a different community, because it felt different. It didn't matter what type of student I was or what I was doing in my classes. So I think that was really compelling to me. And I felt that as an intern doing the programs, but I also especially feel it here. I have now still developing, but I have a professional, different identity. I no longer think of myself as a student, even though, I can have tendencies. I'm still learning how to be the best professional I can. But I think being immersed in, this group and this environment, having this space separate from school has really been very important for me developing that, because prior to finding Gesture programs, I was still, stuck in that school environment and I didn't really know where to start. So I think starting at Gesture was a way to, start that journey.
And you just said two of the most important things. It's ongoing, like it takes time, and you have to keep practicing it, So there are no quick solutions, and you can't just do it once.
Yeah, and it can't really be done alone, or at least that's unbelievably hard. And so, can you find a place where you can go regularly and do that work with other people who are also doing the work? And that is what we are trying to build at Gesture. And really, I think trying to understand how to the moments have been easier for us to understand: a workshop, a program, a boot camp. And so what does the ongoing work look like for people who aren't here with us every day? I think that and now we're finally in the place where we can begin to build that.
So just to recap, Gesture's weird and different.
Yay.
It doesn't fit into the normal structures
Good.
of school, and that's intentional. And hopefully, listening to these last 5 episodes and then this one now, there's those of you listening, maybe something is sparked inside. So I guess the question is like, where are we going next?
Oh my gosh. How do we earn our keep?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the programs that folks have mentioned are being reimagined. So I think there are going to be some in-person programs in our space. That's what we designed it for. So we're going to start welcoming students here. I think we're going to re-engage with our amazing employer partners, some of the folks at Amazon and Microsoft that we've worked with, and think about how that mentoring experience could be transformed into a new stage of engaging with story, which is where we're going to focus all of our work. There's going to be a season 2. This has been fun. I feel like the next round of this, now that, no offense, theorist, but We do have a PhD.
You're fired.
Okay. You have fired me so many times in theory.
Everybody gets fired at Gesture. But
Yeah. You get like pseudo fired here a lot.
I can't wait.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. Yeah.
Like when I,
It's a badge of honor.
we even have a catchphrase for when you get fired. It's called "Got a minute." But no, I think the next round of the podcast, I would love to see us take a step after we've sort of absorbed and digested all this theory and what we do here, and see what it looks like in applications, particularly to the student experience here. I feel like that's a space that, if students could start envisioning, wow, I do that, I see that. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I think there's a large number of students who are ready for this, and we are. And now we finally have the space, which has been a huge holdup for us. So yeah, Condon, it's open for business. I'll go to Costco and get one of those signs, neon signs, put it in the door. Open,
Buckle up.
ready to go. But yeah,
We'll just leave it on all the time.
We don't need to talk about how tethered we are, but we're mildly obsessed with making sure that this place is meaningful. So join us.